Welcome to another episode of the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. Today, our hosts, Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman from Transform CX, are diving into a fascinating and timely discussion about productivity growth and its critical role in shaping the economy this 2025. Drawing inspiration from a recent article in Barron's by Megan Leonhardt, Tim and Andreas explore the potential for businesses to unlock new levels of productivity by leveraging tools like artificial intelligence, stabilizing their workforce, and focusing on employee engagement. They'll share practical insights, real-world examples, and a few laughs along the way. This episode is also brought to you by BalanceWise IQ, a groundbreaking platform designed to help organizations manage in the moment and truly listen to their employees. So sit back, relax, and join us as we uncover smarter, more sustainable ways to drive success.
Hi, everybody. This is Tim Keefe with Transform CX. I'm here again today with my co-conspirator and great friend and sometimes cellmate, Mr. Andreas Wieman, and we're here with another Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. So, Mr. Andreas, sir, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, it's actually, again, an exciting topic that you and I are passionate about. Imagine that. We do so many podcasts on things we're actually passionate about, not forced. And just by the way, I'm a cellmate when I am released for good behavior. So that's the only time we're cellmates. But in all seriousness, a great way to start the podcast off. We just, lost like a few dozen listeners there. But today we're talking about a recent article that was published in Barron's. Productivity growth kept the economy humming this year. Expect more gains in 2025 by Megan Leonhardt. And I think it's a good article because it gives us an outlook. And I think, over the past couple of, let's just say, cycles, there's been, what's the phrase, macroeconomic pressures, however you want to say it. There's been challenges, right? And everything has really been very analyzed and retrospective and backwards. And I kind of like that we're getting to a state where we're forecasting out and looking at things and what the potential could be if action is taken. And that's kind of what I took from this article. And, Tim, you and I love to always talk about, obviously, productivity. Productivity is how can you make the most out of what you have? And a lot of times in the markets that we're talking about, there's a large dependency on humans.
Right.
And how can we augment those humans and make them more productive? And at the same time, we get more, and this is in theory, this is, proven. How do we get more productivity out of humans? And then how do we balance that out with things that resonate with each individual? I'm going to emphasize that word again, individual, and get more productivity out of them. How do we unlock that? Because that, to me, is going to be the key to 2025 and increasing your productivity with the people that you have and get more out of them because they're giving you more of a volunteered effort, as we talk about, rather than a forced effort or the effort that you get when people are starting to quiet quit, which has also been a trend. So, yeah, we'll open with that. Tim, what do you think?
Well, no, you're right on. Again, it aligns with what we've been thinking about, which is, and I love the article is very optimistic, which is great. We don't a lot. It's a nice change, right? So talking about significant improvements in productivity, I think the article is very macroeconomic in the way it talks about it. And where you and I would like to do is maybe, so how does that translate into a day in the life, right? Whether I'm in a high labor organization like tourism and hospitality, or whether I'm in a manufacturing industry, which may be still a lot of people involved, but maybe more automation, whether it's robotics, et cetera, that are driving things. I also think there's just some other interesting or maybe not correlated data, but there are other interesting data points out there, one of which we've talked about a lot, which is, the Quadrix report from early in 2024 that indicated globally employees, the human side of the equation, were operating at roughly a 30% engagement, which is fascinating. Yet, if we really did get, 2.5 or, 2% to 2.5% growth between the end of the pandemic in 2023 and the end of 2024, while we still have relatively low employee engagement, that tells me there's a lot of upside opportunity for productivity growth right there, right? Like, if I can move that needle of employees doing the bare minimum, which is what I would equate 30% to actually enjoying what they're doing and jumping in and wanting to do their job, wow, what would that look like? And how does that translate into the things that, we keep spinning here, which is, and the article references that. It does talk to the fact that a lot of the productivity gains are tied to a stabilization in the workforce. In other words, less churn. So therefore, people have higher tenure. They're probably more comfortable doing the work and therefore are doing more
Right.
because they know how to do it better.
Yeah. No, agreed. And the outcome is of higher quality, which is also contributive to productivity, right? And so exactly what you just said, I think that's where companies, organizations, I don't even say companies, organizations, nonprofits, anyone, how do you do that? Like, where do you start? Everybody's all hyped up on AI right now and Gen AI, and that's great. They should be, frankly. However, how do you put it to practical use, and how do you enable it to help with the everyday occurrences, not just the you have $1 million idea and that's what Gen AI is going to do every single. No, how can you help it with what you're doing today? How can you step back and say, okay, there's a human doing this today. How can we help the human do this better with AI? And I think that's what companies are looking for, because you can do it with AI, but it's extremely expensive right now because I don't necessarily agree with the way that's being operationalized. And so I think maybe giving companies a blueprint of where they should look at first is how we can kind of spark this catalyst for productivity improvement going into 2025. And I think you're going to see spin-off benefits of not just increased productivity, but the attributes or the characteristics that result in increased productivity are going to be the things that you mentioned. You're going to have less attrition, less employee turnover. You're going to have better outcomes, right? Objectively measurable outcomes, not just, I'm a CEO and I give a town hall and, and that's it. Employees are inspired. How do you measure it, right? And I think the big key, and this is where I think AI really has not been leveraged to its extent yet, is how do you listen to your people? Here's a concept. Maybe we trademark this phrase. How do you freaking listen to your people? How do you use AI to do that? And so I don't know. Let's go ahead and pull the covers back and say today's episode is sponsored by BalanceWise IQ, which is an AI tool that helps you do just that. I mean, Tim, what do you want to say about our
Sure.
sponsor?
Well, I'll happy to do the sponsor pitch for our sponsor today. Our first sponsor, by the way. So our episode today is sponsored by BalanceWise IQ. Their tagline is "Manage in the Moment." Very powerful tool. We know the people very involved. We've been actually monitoring some of their implementations, and they're in healthcare, engineering. They're retail,
Automotive.
automotive. They have a global marketplace going on. But what's really powerful about it is a not once or twice a year anonymous survey that then nobody really acts on. It is a very individual. Every employee engages once a week, 3 questions, pulse check, and using that information, we can identify employees that are at risk for attrition. We can also identify high-performing employees that are actually stepping up and doing more. And those are the ones you may want to be thinking about. How do I reward or get them to provide leadership, either by example or real leadership, to their coworkers? Because it's not end of commercial, but I think if we're not listening to the people, right? I always think about like, oh, we're going to deploy AI. So if you're an employee in any organization, right, most people are going to panic when they hear that, because the AI is being positioned as, by implementing AI, we can have fewer people. So it's kind of like any company that says, hey, we're going to lay off 30% of our employee base next year. What happens when you do that?
Yeah.
Everything stops, because everybody goes into, well, what does it mean to me? Am I going to still have a job at the end of the year? And if not, I got to start looking. So in the day, we used to joke about, like, you could just watch the fax machine go crazy on the day you announce a big layoff, because everybody's faxing. I know I'm dating myself, but everybody's sending out their resumes to see what the marketplace is trending for. So I think the risk with AI, one risk of AI, is the messaging, right? And how are you going to bring that into your workforce versus what you were saying earlier, which is, hey, Mr. Employee, I'd like to give you some better tools so that you can be more effective in your job. because people want to be effective in their job. Most people do, right? They
Yeah.
want to be able to solve problems for customers. What's really frustrating for an employee is when they can't do anything, either by policy or the tools don't work or whatever. And the customer is in their face because they're the one representing the company in that moment of truth,
Yeah.
and they can't help.
But
And
think, but the same scenario too. Think about like car dealerships. Car dealerships right now are it's extremely stressful. We always make jokes about car salesmen, right? But if you think about how that industry is morphed to where it's at, it's not like you just walk into a dealership. Some people can and do, but proportionally more people are going online and shopping online. And so the competitiveness of actually closing a sale you're having to do it virtually. And imagine being a salesperson in that role and having a competency of, hey, a person walks in, physical person walks in, and we can look at body language, we can look at, the reaction when we say something, when we say a price, when we say a feature. You don't have any of that now. Now it's all anonymous because it's behind the screen. And so do you think they've adapted their training and styles to the tenured people or the people that have, had this competency forever? Like think about when we did the pandemic and everybody went to work at home. They're like, "Oh, here's what we do in brick and mortar. Let's just do that over Zoom." That was not great, right? It missed the potential. And so if you go to looking at a tool like BalanceWise IQ and unlocking how people are feeling and what they're thinking about and what their job expectation is, the amount of stress relief and anxiety reduction that can be had, which again, and this is in theory, you can go look at I wish I had the sources I could cite offhand, but you can go Google it, Perplexity it, GPT it, whatever. We used to say Google it. Now we can say all these, Gen AI interfaces. But
it makes us sound smart. It's good. You do
yeah,
that. Keep doing that.
exactly. But you can go back and look at the connection of when people feel comfortable, you have better adoption and adherence, which results in more productivity. And so there isn't, my point to this long-winded spiel at this point, there is not an industry, I think, that we've found where you can't make the case that if you can find a conducive way and, as non-evasive as possible to listen to your employees and get their feedback and then reciprocate that with actions quickly, right? How much more appreciative they are. And you can go measure it again, objectively measure it, baseline where you're at today, and then start objectively measuring benchmark after benchmark, especially with a tool like BalanceWise IQ that's once a week, right? You
Yep.
can do measurements instead of these other surveys that are once a year. Half the people have already quit that filled it out, and you're paying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for that. It's a great tool to make data-driven decisions, but incorporate AI in a meaningful, impactful, humanized way.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think I use this analogy maybe too often, but I always think about new technology and and AI, clearly new technology, very capable, does a lot of cool things. Clearly, initially, what we're talking about is tools that now allow us to do the tool does the grunt work for us, right? So that enables the human to focus more on the creative side of the work that they're doing. Okay, well, we've seen this before. I mean, some of us have long enough to remember when spreadsheets came in, right? And calculators went away. And what did a spreadsheet do at the end of the day? It really just a basic automation or
Yep.
tools that allow an individual to do more, right? To be more, so it's in the military, they call it a force multiplier, right? Which
Yep.
is allows one
Exactly.
person to look like more. And so I think AI, rather than, everybody's going for, and they should, right? Everybody's going for the gold ring with the idea that this is going to be the killer app. And again, been there, done this a few times in my career. But underneath that, it's like, where does the Gen AI or these other tools come into play and become real effective force multipliers? That's where you're going to get your productivity jump that we're just talking about at the beginning of the call. That's going to drive economic growth. So
Yep.
if I can allow somebody like, for example, an analyst, right? So what is a big part of the analyst job, which is making sure that they're sourcing data so that they can help present data-driven recommendations so that then decision makers can say, I'm making this decision based on the data that's available to me to support this? And so again, if we can use the tool to say, hey, I can have that analyst now spending less time doing grunt lookup, right? Because Gen AI, I've ChatGPT 4.0, which gives you the web references, et cetera, can be a more effective tool to do that. Like with every tool, if you just stick your hand in the toolbox and rummage around, you're probably going to cut your finger off. So you need to learn how to use the tool. You need to learn how to use the tool effectively. And like with a lot of technology implementations, I think my recommendation would be pick off something that you understand, like a good, well organized process, and then look where I can use AI in those processes, whether it's for automation or force multiplication or whatever it might be. But again, I'm not disagreeing with the statement of the article. I think Megan did a great job of like calling out that economic growth, productivity drives economic growth. But what I think is the challenge is how do I, as an operator, as an executive, as a team lead, actually deliver on that? And I think if it's got to be, how do I listen to my people and say, okay, what do you need from me, your boss, to be more productive? And I know sounds like a really simple question, but it's not a simple answer.
I look at it like this, exactly as you just said it. How can every company is trying to operationalize AI. The problem is they're only looking at the silver bullet, right? They need to look at the practicality and talk to their employees, listen to their employees so their employees feel comfortable, and then they start giving more feedback. And then the feedback they're going to get from their frontline employees, and that's who I'm referencing in this example, your frontline employees are going to say, okay, well, you're asking me to do this. If I had this tool, this 5% of my job, they're not literally going to say this, but they'll indicate it. This 5% of my job, I can do better and quicker. That's how you implement AI. How can you figure out how to incrementally and practically improve the current job requirements, the current output that is expected, and baseline that, and then introduce AI to the frontline people, the people that you have the highest dependency of the outcome of your organization on? How can you make their jobs a little bit easier without reversing any quality outcomes? You want to make sure you don't compromise quantity over quality. You got to balance both of those and ensure that there's a high level of quality in association with improved quality outcomes with the quantity of the outcomes. That's where people in organizations have to start. The problem is they're like, all right, I have 800 people. This is my sarcastic voice. I have 800 people. How can I just use AI so I only have to have 400 people? And then they spend more money investing in AI. It doesn't work like they think. And now they need 900 people instead of the 800 people. So they have a higher expense. And then they also have the expense of the AI infrastructure that they're trying to operationalize that's not working. So quit trying to boil the ocean, quit trying to find the silver bullet, be very practical and pragmatic about where you can apply AI. I can guarantee you will see improvements, incremental improvements, maybe even more than incremental improvements, but start with thinking practical incremental improvements, and you'll see a whole new world of possibilities that will allow you to unlock the force multiplier that Tim is talking about much more expeditiously, much quicker.
Agreed. And I think that's a great wrap up for, again, a good article. Megan did, I think, a great job of getting an important topic out there. And this will be something we talk more and more about because it is that intersection or inflection point of new technology getting a lot of hype. We'll see how much of that hype plays out into the real world. It's not going away. So, let's take it for what it's worth. But to your point, do it in a way that's manageable for you, your organization, and also probably want to listen to your team, who are the people that are actually going to be using it, because they might have some really good ideas on how to implement it in the way that you want.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, just think of it like I will end with a sports analogy, like a football team. It's playoffs are getting ready to get here. It looks like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to win the division today, unlike San Francisco 49ers. But imagine a football team having this look of saying, nope, you know what? We're going to duct tape your mouth shut of every football player on the team, and you're only going to listen to the coach. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to give feedback. You're not allowed to do it. How productive or how better do you think that team is going to perform? They're probably going to end up with a record like the San Francisco 49ers. Not that John Lynch did that. I'm a huge John Lynch guy, Tampa Bay Bucks, but and also I'm making light of the situation, obviously, but think about that example. Think about examples of where it's worked, where you haven't listened to the people. Listen to your people and just find constructive ways that you can show them you're listening. And then again, baseline productivity and see what kind of productivity improvements you get from there.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, thank you, sir. As always, wonderful to spend some time with you. And to our listeners, please subscribe if you have the opportunity. You want to hear more of us. We really love doing these things, but we love getting your feedback on topics and other things. And also a shout out to our sponsor, BalanceWise IQ. Please check them out at www.bwiq.com. And you can learn more about managing in the moment. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.